You've said that the two, I guess, greatest accomplishments of this blob were, I think, COVID and then the suppression of the conversation about mail-in ballots. And these were the things that kind of happened in 2020. Fast forward to today, what is their priority now for 24? Because you've got a lot of things happening. You've got, this election coming up. You've got lots of talk going on. Have they focused their attention to other pieces? And then now we also have this AI component, which is much more effective than maybe it used to be, where maybe you had these weapons of mass deletion. I love that concept. But with AI, it might replace those 10,000 people or 25,000 people you used to have in this mechanism with maybe one algo or one AI. So maybe you can speak on that.
Yeah. So starting with the 2024 election, and, the blob sees it as being much, much, much more than just the election here in the U.S. in November 2024. So my foundation, Foundation for Freedom Online, has published a bunch of the blob's blueprints for what they plan to do with 2024. It turns out, serendipitously, that 2024 actually will have more elections around the world than any other year in human history. I think it's something like 85 elections or something between 65 and 85 elections all around the world. And you have to understand, once this social media censorship power was debuted, really starting in 2016 with this sort of AI capacity and the ability to track emerging narratives simply by using keywords and having, narrative network mappers on U.S. payroll, they really saw this kind of El Dorado, gold mine for how to control elections all around the world. It became part of our operating mandate, at state, in the NGO swarm, and in with our liaisons in the tech platforms to be able to manipulate every election around the world. Doesn't matter if that's US, UK, it could be places as remote as Tanzania or Madagascar. If there's an election in process, the State Department is going to have a preference about who wins or loses, which means the State Department is going to be reaching out to the Facebook and the Google and the Twitter trust and safety teams and content moderation teams, at those regional offices to make sure that their definitions of mis and disinformation or hate speech or whatever the toss violation of flavor of the day is going to tilt that election cycle in order to kick the opposition who's disfavored by the State Department off of social media so that the messaging is saturated by whoever is favored by the U.S. State Department. And it's not just the U.S. State Department, by the way, it's the U.K. Foreign Office as well. In many respects, and in some regions, the UK actually figures even more heavily in this and sort of occupies the senior role, whereas the State Department will sometimes occupy the junior role in a region. Depends on the sort of financial interests that the US and UK have. But this is very much a joint operation. It's almost an even split there. But we refer to that as the Transatlantic Alliance, not interstate collusion. But anyway, getting back to this, sort of story of what they're doing for 2024, things are very much in flux right now. After you had the censorship of the pre-censorship of what they called the Red Mirage Blue Shift event in 2020, which was everything from mail-in ballots to early voting drop boxes to ballot day election day ballot tabulation. There was the COVID censorship saga, and then. And from 2021 to early 2023, they really set their sights on every sensitive policy issue. They thought that they'd be politically unopposed forever. This was before the House changed over from Democrat to Republican. And you had these voices like Jim Jordan and Representative Dan Bishop and James Comer in the Oversight Committee before you started to have the House subpoenaing people and holding these hearings, before Elon Musk acquired Twitter. And Twitter, make no mistake, even though it's the smallest of the platforms, it is by far the most significant in terms of political discourse. YouTube is the single highest trafficked website on the internet after Google.com, and it's owned by Google. So, YouTube is effectively the biggest website on the internet by traffic. Facebook has the most. Facebook and Instagram have over 2 billion monthly active users, whereas Twitter is only a quarter of that at 500 million. But Twitter is by far the most important politically because of the nature of how information spreads on Twitter. Only a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of people who use YouTube actually have YouTube accounts or are YouTube content creators. Most of that is just passive absorption. When you watch a YouTube video, you don't simultaneously share a YouTube video. And on Facebook, there are Facebook groups, but for the most part, it's personal information. And Instagram is mostly sort of photos and videos, and is more about your personal story and personal branding. The political discourse and the reciprocal nature of the retweet button allows political ideas to spread on Twitter like no other platform. And in addition to that, because Twitter was the only social media company that was not a walled garden, at least until late 2023. And I can get to that because this impacts the AI story. But until Elon Musk created this sort of walled garden in late 2023, everything on Twitter was open. You didn't even need a Twitter account to be able to see things on Twitter, and everybody's Twitter was public. Most information on Facebook posts, you need to know that person or be friends of a friend. It depends on the privacy setting of any individual person. Whereas on Twitter, everything was public and still is. Elon made a change after in the summer of 2023, where he required an account to log in to actually see things that are on Twitter. He also imposed these rate limits on the amount of posts that you could see in a certain day. And one of the first things that I did that had sort of viral breakthrough on my own X handle, which is at Mike Ben Cyber. I'm highly active there. I probably post 30 times a day. But I did a video on this in the summer of 2023, where I talked about the impact that this would have on AI censorship. And this relates. I know this is a very long way of getting to the 2024 election, but this rate limit policy actually limits the ability for AI censorship technology to ingest tweets in order to create the models that their AI censorship techniques are trained on. So I'll give you an example. In the 2020 election, these four groups partnered with the U.S. government: the Stanford Internet Observatory, the Bill Gates University, University of Washington, Graphica, which is this Pentagon cutout from the Pentagon Psychological Operations Research Center, and the Atlantic Council, which has 7 CIA directors on its board and gets annual funding from the Pentagon and the State Department. They were all part of this consortium called the Election Integrity Partnership. And one of the things that they did is they used these AI machine learning training models to ingest 859 million tweets on Twitter in the run up to the 2020 election. So that's almost 1 billion tweets, all ingested, for training a model in order to micro target anyone who expressed an opinion which was said to, quote, undermine public faith and confidence in mail-in ballots. So it didn't even have to be false, because this is misdis and malinformation, meaning it's true. We can't rebut it on factual grounds, but it still has the effect of undermining public faith in our narrative, the government narrative that mail-in ballots were safe and secure. So their model ingested 860 million tweets. And from that, their model said 22 million of these tweets undermine public faith and confidence in mail-in ballots. And so they were able to get 22 million tweets designated as misinformation, essentially sandblasted off the internet, as long as they had someone at Twitter who was willing to say, yes, that is part of our delegitimization toss violation. So that superpower to be able to sandblast 22 million tweets off the internet in one single go is only made possible because they were able to ingest 859 million tweets in the first place. This new change at Twitter with the rate limit, I said runs right into a DARPA rattlesnake, in the sense that now that can't be done so easily. Now, you could obviously string together 10,000 accounts to simulate that. There's going to have to be, new technological techniques to be able to get that same AI Death Star up and running again. And that's part of what they're reorganizing to do. But part of that is now Twitter does not want to necessarily play ball. They're not disclosing the same amount of internal data that they were disclosing when Yoel Roth was running the trust and safety there. Yoel Roth came from, essentially the U.S. government in a certain respect, and he went right back into it, you can argue. He's now working at the Carnegie Endowment. The Carnegie Endowment was run from 2014 to 2021. So for the past 7 years by Bill Burns. Bill Burns, who was formerly, one of the most esteemed diplomats at the U.S. State Department. Again, part of that State Department, CIA, DOD blob trifecta. Well, what is Bill Burns doing right now? What did he do? What was his first job when he left the Carnegie Endowment? He's currently Joe Biden's director of the Central Intelligence Agency. So Yoel Roth went from running the censorship operations at Twitter to the place that was run immediately for the past 7 years by the guy who's now the number one head of the CIA. So rotating right back into that blob, but they don't have the same level of access to that data to the thing that charges the AI Death Star to be able to kill tens of millions of tweets in one go, or Facebook posts or YouTube videos. But they're working to get that back through using the law. And there's two sets of laws that they're doing that through. One of these is this new NATO censorship law. It's known as the EU Digital Services Act. This is something that I ran up against while I was at the State Department. But this is essentially a new extension beyond the simple hate speech laws of Europe to go, even if something is not hate speech or can't be argued to be hate speech, there's a new component called disinformation, which is basically anything that NATO doesn't like can be declared disinformation, in the same way that the Pentagon and the DHS were declaring, anything that undermined public faith and confidence in COVID vaccines or mail-in ballots to be disinformation. NATO can now do that through this new EU Digital Services Act, which might create a legal requirement for Twitter to censor elections if NATO designates some operation, something strange like ballot harvesting. Anyone who challenges ballot harvesting practices, that is deemed to be election disinformation. Well, if that comes down top down from NATO, well, Twitter's in a real bind. Then they either have to censor the election to favor whatever party is engaged in those ballot trafficking practices, or else they might lose their entire EU market. The only ways to get out, the only safe harbor provisions for the disinformation compliance under that law are going to be to hire teams of NATO intermediated blob monsters, which is basically you hire the censorship organizations to run your company, to run your trust and safety teams. Some of this is still being codified right now, but the people codifying it are cutouts of the foreign policy establishment. Or you lose your EU market, which is 550 million people. That's a bigger market than the US, so that's not feasible. Or you have to pay them 6% of your global annual revenue. So that's probably more than the profit margins of any major tech company. They have huge amounts of global revenue, but they run on significantly less for the profit margins. So they're going to basically have to do what NATO says, and they're now at NATO's mercy for how they define disinformation in terms of how the 2024 election cycles go. But the other way is they're doing it through state laws. California just passed this new data transparency law that might force Twitter to turn over all the internal data that will allow these CIA cutouts to recreate these AI Death Stars by getting new access to this data that Elon Musk foreclosed on. So they're doing a lot of different dirty tricks. They're doing it in the US, they're doing it across Europe, and they're doing it, for all 85, in process elections according you can read all about this on the Foundation for Freedom online website, which I'll post, after this interview on my X page.
So Jim Rickards has just recorded a video that's not available to anyone in the public, and he's going to be talking about how this upcoming recession is going to be fast. It's going to be bloody, it's going to be nasty. But at the same time, he's going to show you how you can position yourself to profit from all of this chaos. Now, we've made this video only available to our viewers. Go to londonreal.tv/Jim. Watch that immediately. I can't say enough good things about Jim Rickards. He understands the global economic system better than any guest I've ever had on London Real. His predictions are almost uncannily true, and you can learn how to profit from his vision, from his expertise, and his understanding of economics. So go to londonreal.tv/Jim or click the link below. It's an excellent, excellent look on what's going to happen in the future and how you can position yourself to profit from that. Jim is one of the best in the business, one of my favorite guests on London Real, and he's very, very good at predicting the future and showing us all to profit from it. So click the link, and I hope you enjoy. I'm looking for partners, collaborators, colleagues who want to join forces with me around the globe and create real value, generational wealth, and financial freedom for everyone else around the world. Get involved in the cryptocurrency markets, get involved in the NFT markets. This is your moment. Life all comes down to a few moments. Don't let this pass. Now it's not too late. Next year's going to be too late. Ultimately, this is about freedom. That's the way I see it. This is about giving power back to the people and enabling billions of people worldwide to use the financial markets to improve their lives and those of their friends and their families and their communities. Honestly, I think it's a violation of human rights not to allow people basic access to financial services. Because right now people are being kept in the dark, they're being robbed of education, and it's a travesty. And so I'm looking for people that want to join me and be a part of this solution. And that all happens inside the DeFi Academy. The gains my students are making are absolutely amazing. Double, triple digit gains in the first month alone. That's amazing. This will change your life. Now is the time to get involved. I'm going to tell you exactly how my students in my academy made money in the last 30 days. I'm talking about real trading results. And let me just whet your appetite a little bit. Let me hit you with some numbers. I'm talking Brendan from New Zealand is up 68.77% on the month. Steve from Europe up 83%. Albert in Singapore up 169.9% on one single trade. I got Susan up 153% on her call options alone, also rocking 139% returns and 442% returns as well on individual trades. These are people that are changing their financial future in the last 30 days, but it's based on trading discipline.
I've graduated over 500 students from inside my academy from over 54 countries around the world. It's amazing. When it comes to crypto, DeFi, and blockchain, we love this space. We truly believe it's the future. This is down to our core. It's authentic to what we're doing, and everybody can tell through the camera because you can't make this stuff up.
If you're watching me now, wherever you are, I implore you, take 60 seconds right now and join my academy. Apply today. Now you've got a chance. Life all comes down to a few moments. What are you going to do? What's the choice that you're going to make?